when a guard would stop and talk to you, you used to stand back and you would yell so people could hear what you were saying to that guard as they walked by or within the vicinity.
But he knew what a convict was going to do before they thought of it themselves. He'd just been around that long, and he was tough.
They'd find Sparky in about every conceivable place you could imagine, which we would, of course, dump.
They'd wait until everybody was locked up, and he would open his door and run down to cell 1 and get a bugler can full of Sparky and take it back to his cells.
She had a kind of a hypnotic power. There were a great many wild cats around the penitentiary, and most people couldn't get near them. But she would stand in the doorway of the cell house and say, "Kitty, kitty, kitty," and those cats would go to her.
Well, welcome to Stool, Pigeon Saturday. Today we have James Klimek, who is a longtime tour guide and just an extraordinary researcher here at the Old Pen. So, James, thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little about yourself, what you do, and how long you've been giving tours and things out here at the Old Pen?
Yeah, so I went to Boise State University from 2012 until 2016, majored in history, and as soon as I was graduated, I came here, started working here at the summer of 2016, and then I got a job at the Nampa School District as a history teacher at Nampa High. So I've been doing both gigs for the past few years, and it's been great. Doing teaching during the school year, and then tours here, and then random stuff, frightened felons and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a history teacher, because good ones are few and far between, and teachers just don't get paid what they should get paid, and it's a bit of a thankless job, especially in high school, and it's a lot of just really basic stuff that you have to kind of gloss over. So being a history major and someone who potentially is headed that way, I appreciate all your efforts in teaching your kids.
Yeah, it was my
history.
pleasure.
Yeah, how have you kind of settled into it? You're fairly new at it, right?
Kinda. So my first year I taught, U.S. and then psychology, and then I taught myths and legends and geography and psychology, and then this year I'm going to U.S. history again and myths and legends. So every year I've kind of done something different, and so when I think I'm like good to go, they're like, "Hey, guess what?" And I'm like, "Cool, I would love to do this."
This is why just our school system is broken. Like, we're forcing history majors to teach geography, and geography's so boring. Sorry, no offense to geographers out there.
My best friend's a geographer. And he's
Anthony's best friend.
He just unfollowed this podcast.
Wow.
No,
we gotta have someone who's not related to us listen to the podcast.
It's actually they're making good strides into fixing stuff like that.
Good.
It used to be that if you majored in one of 6 areas and then took one class in the other 5, you could teach all 6 subjects, having only taken one class in most of them.
Oh boy.
They got rid of that the year I graduated. So I can teach all 6 of those classes, but I don't like to.
Yeah.
Because I'm not, what's the word? I'm not a professional enough in those areas.
Right.
I'm not knowledgeable enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So I finally kind of put my foot down. I was like, look, not only is this bad for me, but it's bad for the students.
Absolutely.
And so they got somebody to do it, and I'm excited because the students deserve that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that is our Stool Pigeon Saturday soapbox.
Education in Idaho.
Hey.
That's great. Well, yeah, thank you for taking some time out, doing some research, some extra work outside of your already busy schedule to come do this. And what do you have for us today?
So today I want to talk about one of my favorite subjects here at the penitentiary, and that is Dennis the cat. Aww. Yeah, he's my favorite, and he has been for a long time. I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm kind of going to structure this almost like a lesson. So I'm not just going to tell the Dennis story. I'm going to talk about also his legacy and the historical accuracy as it's depicted here versus what we actually know from the sources, right? Which I know this is going to come as a surprise to you guys. There is some inaccuracies.
A few discrepancies
Wait,
that you've heard.
What? What are you talking about?
Yeah, Dennis was not 6 feet tall.
What?
And 200 pounds.
Yep.
He's just a small cat.
Very
Though,
close,
do you
though.
remember one time I found in the clock, we were looking for like other prison pets, and there was an article that said that our favorite cat Dennis may have some competition, and I don't remember what his name was, but it like gave a name about like a potential new pet, and I was like, I don't know if this is a person, I don't know if this is an actual pet. And then later I found another article in the clock that talked about the same guy and basically told him that he was really fat and that he needed to lose weight, and it became very clear it was a human, and I was like, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
side note,
Yeah.
Dennis.
So I'm glad you brought up the clock, because I'm going to talk about that a little bit. That's our, what would you call the monthly newsletter?
Yeah.
Which,
the inmate publications.
yeah, that's a very professional way of stating it. Inmate publication. When Anthony told me about it, I was like, oh, it'll be a couple pages. I'll go down to the archives and I'll look through 12 years of the clock.
No.
And I'll find Dennis.
Nope.
Turns out the clock is not short.
Nope.
No.
And it's not indexed either.
No, and there's some missing months, unfortunately. The ones that I was looking through were like 40, 50 pages. Yeah. So it came down to, do you go deep, do you go wide, or do you do it quickly? And so I just had to choose two, and I went with breadth and quick. So I didn't go I didn't get to read everything, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did find some stuff about Dennis that I had not seen before. So I'm going to be excited to talk about that today.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. And the clock was a newspaper that was completely written and produced by the inmates. They had their own printing press and everything. And they would, for like 25 cents a year, you would get this monthly magazine that was written by inmates here. So often family members would pay this 25 cents and get all these articles, and their son wrote a poem in the some page with beautiful art made by some other inmates. It was this nice little publication. So yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if you were going to talk about that.
I might have. I don't know where this is going yet.
But the clock was basically active from like 1948 through until the prison closed down. And currently in Idaho, we do not have an inmate publication.
I think Skye's going to like this. I get to correct Anthony on something.
Yes.
47.
47, that's right. It was like
Anthony,
November of 47,
you're
right?
fired.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I made the mistake when I went in. I was like, start me off at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so I got 47, and I was like, maybe I should start in 52
Yeah.
when Dennis was around.
In the 30s, they had another publication called the Wall City Bulletin, which, oh man, that is some classic writing. It's fun. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to talk about is going to be like the legend of Dennis the cat, right? It's going to be the story that you hear more or less from anyone who gives a tour. I'm going to follow that up with like the legacy, like what are prisons doing now that has to do with prison pets.
I like it.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about the accuracy of the historical record and what agrees and what doesn't with the legend. So I'll start with the legend, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Please.
So as it goes, in 1952, there's an inmate who was doing his daily duties in number 2 yard. I've heard both the chicken coop and the barn. Yeah. Turns out, from the historical record, it was the chicken coop. So he was doing his daily duties in the chicken coop, and he happened across what he thought to be a 3 to 4 week old kitten. Couldn't find this cat's mama cat, despite searching high and low for her, of course. Was afraid this kitten wouldn't survive the night, and so he snuck it in through the 2 yard gate when he came in. Couldn't show anybody because, no pets allowed in prison. And so he and about 6 other inmates would pass this cat back and forth between their cells to keep him hidden from the guards. So that lasted about 6 weeks when finally a guard discovered Dennis. Took him to the warden, and initially the warden was furious, like, brah, 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 cat in my prison, brah, brah, brah. It's probably not a historically accurate representation.
I think that's exactly how it went.
So the warden then looked at his ledger and noticed that these 6 inmates that were hiding the cat were like the best behaved inmates for the past like 6 weeks because they didn't want him found. Yeah. And so the warden decided he was going to make a deal with these inmates. He said, tell you what, I'm going to let you guys keep this cat, but you have to let him go wherever he wants, whenever he wants. If he escapes or if he dies, we're done. This is not a thing anymore. And if there's a big hullabaloo, if there's a riot, then I'm taking him away and no more prison pets. And so the inmates agreed. They named him Dennis. And Dennis quickly became beloved by not only the inmates, but also by the staff. So he would not spend 2 nights in the same cell. So he traveled around. He got to know all of the inmates. He would visit the guards up in the towers, and he would go into the administration building. Everyone loved Dennis. Yeah. Dennis was hoped to be a good mouser because there was a mouse problem at the time. But in order to get fed, all he had to do was go to the dining hall and he would get whatever he wanted because everyone loved Dennis. So he ended up being a 16-pound cat. So quite portly.
Yeah, it's a big cat.
Yeah. In his later years, he ended up spending most of his time in the barber shop. And one day, Memorial Day of 1968, he got up on the barbershop counter and meowed at the barber. The barber pulled out a clump of blankets and towels, which was Dennis's bed, put him on the counter, and left for the day, and Dennis laid down. And the barber returned the next day and found that Dennis had passed away. He was so beloved by both the staff and the inmates that the warden not only allowed the inmates to build him his own tombstone, but to also have a full funeral with eulogies from prisoners and guards. So for 3 days, there was a procession of inmates and guards who went by his grave and gave their accounts from Dennis. It is said that for the 16 years he was here were the most peaceful times here at the penitentiary because no one wanted Dennis taken away. Yeah. So it really goes to show what a simple feline can do for a group of hardened criminals in a penitentiary.
Yeah.
So that's the legend of Dennis the cat. Now, what is his legacy, right? So turns out, and this is not necessarily as a result of Dennis himself, but this is a program that is being used both for male and female inmates. There's 2 programs. The first one's called the Inmate Dog Alliance Project of Idaho, called, and I might be pronouncing the acronym wrong, but IDAPI, I'm not sure. There are up to 30 dogs that go through this program each year. They use positive reinforcement techniques in order to train these often not well-trained dogs in the correctional facility. There's apparently 3 different facilities that they use this program at, and it rotates. This program has been going since 2004, and it teaches the inmates responsibility, patience, tolerance, persistence, and empathy. So these inmates get these dogs, they train them, and then those animals are set to be put up for adoption through the Idaho Humane Society. It also enforces a sense of community and higher morale with the inmates. This program, or some program like it, is used all over the United States, and it's very effective in keeping inmates with high morale and being a part of the community, which is important. In fact, I looked today, and there are 6 dogs available to be adopted through the Humane Society that have gone through this program. So if any of our listeners are in the local area and are thinking about getting a dog, you can go through this process. That being said, it is a longer process because these dogs they've been through the rigors, right? They want to make sure they go to the right homes, but that's what the Humane Society is for, right? The other program that we have in Idaho, and I think they got the acronym before they got the actual name. It is called the Women Inmate Social Kitty Retreat, or WISCR.
Oh.
Yeah. So this one is
Kitty
run
retreat.
Kitty retreat. That sounds like the best retreats.
The best.
This one's at the South Boise Women's Correctional Facility. And usually cats come in here when they have upper respiratory problems. They also have mama cats and their kittens that come in.
Babies.
Yeah. And then orphaned kitties that whose mothers have either who are not around for one reason or another. So these are usually kittens that have to be bottle fed by inmates. Same thing, teaches these inmates, responsibility, patience, tolerance, empathy. This one's a little newer. This one was launched in 2016. Yeah, so apparently the men's program with the dogs worked really well, so they decided to extend that to the women's. So this is something that is very effective and, like I said, used all over the country. So, like I said, not necessarily a direct legacy from Dennis, but something that has been used, for the better part of a decade in this state.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to move on to the historical accuracy of the story I just told you, and this should come as no surprise. There's some
inaccuracies?
Yeah, inaccuracies, some discrepancies. That's the
Again,
smart
I say
word.
what?
Yes. Okay, so the one source that we've all seen is Dennis's obituary, which I will talk about a little bit. But first, I want to go through some sources that I found from the clock. And these were from like shorter sections. And 2 articles were from The Snooper and from Stray Shots. So the earliest one was from April of 1955. And this read that Dennis, and then in quotations, the cat, Menace. So Dennis the Menace, eyeing the goldfish in the new pond in the yard. Which has the biggest gleam in his eye, Lucky or Dennis? So Dennis had his eye on some goldfish out in the yard.
Because there was a pond in what is now the Rose Garden, and that's where the story of Champ also comes in. Was he was a big old frog sitting there with on his lily pad.
Yeah.
So they put some goldfish in there for probably not for Dennis, but just for
and
hanging out.
they would make bets because apparently this bullfrog could eat anything, and they would make bets on he can't eat that grasshopper's huge, and then he'd eat it, and then it just kept going up until he ate a sparrow.
Oh my
he
God.
ate a bird. Yeah, and that like the
big
newspaper
old
has a
bullfrog.
photo of him, and it's
A
just
photo?
yeah, like the
Not
news
the
Idaho
drawing.
Statesman did a report on this frog, and there's a
I
photo.
need you to send me that.
I do. I'll post that on
crazy.
in this as well.
Nice.
So fun.
So the article from Stray Shots, and this really goes back to like the kind of the legend of Dennis, that everyone loved him and he was beloved and everyone protected him. So this one's titled Hitchhiker. This one says, best prize for the most rides garnered in the week goes to Dennis the Menace, the number 2 yard cat. Come rain or shine, he's always waiting at the gate for a free ride to the upholstery shop, perched atop the shoulder of Paul H. So I don't know who Paul H is, but presumably an inmate. It goes on to say, who says cats are dumb? So Dennis knew what he was doing. He owned the place.
Cute.
So that's really the only solid information we have from him during his lifetime that I'm aware of. The rest of everything we get from his obituary. And I know that I'm going to tear up when I go through some of this. Maybe not. We'll see what happens.
I teared up in recording our last episode, so it's fine.
Yeah. So obviously I'm not going to go through and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to kind of give you guys the TLDR version. Is that a good term? I should give you guys the Spark Notes version.
Yes.
There we
Yes.
go. Yeah.
Yes.
Too long didn't read.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's like
such a high school term.
5 paragraphs, and then like you have one sentence that sums up the 5 paragraphs. Like,
Okay, so the Spark Notes version is that as far as we know, Dennis was brought into the yard in June of 1952. So 1 month after the legend says. The legend says that he survived, or that he was in the yard exactly 16 years from Memorial Day of 52 until Memorial Day of 1968. So not a huge deal, 1 month. He was first given to a prisoner in a box in the license plate factory. So supposedly he came from the chicken coop, but no one knows who did it. And we don't know how that box came into the yard, what have you. He was snuck meat from the butcher shop by the inmates. So he was kind of a secret inside the license plate factory, but not in a cell. That inmate was locked up in solitary confinement for who knows what reason. And so a new inmate had to take over for the first inmate in order to make sure Dennis was fed. By all accounts, it took about a year for Dennis to warm up to new inmates. And so new inmates were, they were called fish, right? Yeah. And so in this, it said that you knew someone wasn't a fish when Dennis would approach him. So he was kind of the gatekeeper. Like, oh, Dennis came up to you. You're no longer a fish.
you're an old timer now.
Yeah. So that second inmate was transferred somewhere else. And then Dennis mostly moved to the barber shop. And that's eventually where he would pass away. It was said that any time that he came onto the yard where games were being played, croquet, basketball, whatever, the games would stop and people just let Dennis through. He was a VIP. Guards would actually open doors for Dennis. So he definitely got special treatment.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love this story.
Oh, it is the best. So I already mentioned the two other articles from the clock that I could find. And I would like to read one of the last pieces from his obituary, because I couldn't say it any better than Ed Eline, who wrote this obituary for Dennis. It says, with a ceremony that would have done credit to a small-town mayor, the old cat was laid to rest in a grave hewed out of a lawn he had considered his own personal property. A concrete slab was poured atop the grave. A stainless steel plaque engraved in the machine shop tells his story. For several days, a steady procession of hardened convicts went around behind the building to see Dennis's grave. Not a single person associated with the prison has been heard to laugh about the elaborate burial or gravestone.
God,
yeah,
so dang sweet.
So
yeah,
sweet.
I can't even believe it.
Yeah. So what? And this is something, the discrepancies between the legend of Dennis the Cat and the historical accuracy is something that we deal with in history all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So the question I would pose to readers, and I would pose to you guys, is what do we do now, right? We can't say with certainty that the story that we've been telling is 100% true, but it's a great story, right? So when does it go from, we know it's not true, but it's such a great story that we want to keep telling it? Or do we kind of face up to the historical accuracy and say, this is what we do now?
I always think that the actual story is...
It's so sweet.
Good.
Like, it's just
good.
as good
Yeah.
as the legend. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I did have a quick question. So he was hidden in the license plate factory.
Which is 2 yard.
2 yard for a while. Mm-hmm. And then eventually he's moved to the barbershop. So at what point did officials find out about him?
And there's nothing in the
There's
record that says.
no documentation about that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it may have been just one of those things where he had been kind of established and found in the tag plant at some point, and then it was just
like a thing.
Yeah. But it was pretty common to have, mousers at this institution. But Dennis achieved a status beyond just a prison mouser. That is his legacy. And I feel like if we just tell this story, and I always talk about the clock and this 2-page obituary written about a cat. My grandma didn't even have a 2-page obituary in the newspaper. This is a solid.
Well, and it's
him.
such good language as it's being written. It's clearly people who cared about him.
Yeah.
This isn't just some prison cat that's just whatever, he was around. It goes to show the humanity of these inmates, that they cared for this other being, that no matter what they'd done, they cared about this cat. And I wonder how much of it was they were taught to care about this cat. That's Dennis. You don't mess with him.
Nobody messes with
us. You will have all of us to pay if you do. And I love it.
I actually shadowed a former inmate who served in 65 through 66 here. And he was just taking me through the site, and I'm asking him questions about different things. And they said, whatever happened to that cat? And I grinned. I'm like, which cat? Because I wanted to just test him. He's like, And I said, Dennis? And he's like, Dennis, yeah. And he lit up. And I showed him the grave, and he was tearing up. And he's like, Dennis was everybody's cat. You don't understand how important this cat was to us here at this site. And I don't know, that made it real for me, that, wow, this little feline shared so much love to all these men who are the unloved, and they're forgotten. They're behind these gray walls, and where they're meant to be without anything. And they had this little piece of heart that would rub up against their leg and make them feel good, something that they don't have. You don't get that in prison, and that's why these programs are so effective. And I think his legacy of this great little spark of joy, I don't know, I think it's important for us to always tell that story.
And I think to tell it like we were saying, the way it is, it's not that different. It's not going to take that much to be we used to say it this way, but it turns out this is actually how it was. And it's still I'm still I love Dennis so much. Even after it's, this story is different than what I've been telling. So people will be just as touched by this true story than the legend. And Dennis is Dennis. He was here for 16 years and everyone loved him. That's the basis of our legend, and that's the basis of the truth. So
there's this great recent story in the early aughts that there was a kitten found in the prison yard. And so the staff here at the site, this is before my time, they decided to take this cat in, and they were raising the cat, and they named it Dennis, of course. And unfortunately, someone had to take Dennis home because he kept setting off alarms in different buildings. So, but I hope that it would be really cool if someday we could get another prison cat here. And
JC would love that. I
that'd
would
be
love
amazing.
that.
I think everybody would love visitors, like seeing this cat dart by. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Dennis is such a good story.
It is.
James, thank you for
Yes,
bringing this
thank you
in.
so
and
much.
I loved it.
Such a happy day.
Yeah, I might reach out to Department of Corrections and see if someone, a representative from these different programs that you've spoken about, if they would come and talk about the things that they've seen happen with the program. And maybe
great.
if I could speak to some of the inmates and say, see how much it has affected them, so we can get that contemporary voice of, what a dentist will do in your life.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
So neat. Nice. Well, thank you.
Well,
That's
thank you.
inspiring.
This is
Wow,
great, guys.
cool.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I mean, Dennis is my favorite, and even after the research, like you guys said, he had an impact here, and he will continue to have an impact as long as we're an organization. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, we always like to end our podcast by seeing how you'll respond. If we say, do your own time, how would you respond?
Do your own number.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it, James. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
See y'all next week. If you enjoyed Behind Gray Walls, please rate, review, and subscribe so others can find our podcast. If you're interested in more Old Idaho Penitentiary information and to see mugshots of the inmates featured in this episode, follow the Old Idaho Penitentiary on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to learn more about the Idaho State Historical Society and its other sites, follow ID State Historical Society on Instagram or visit history.idaho.gov. If you have a question or comment for the hosts, please email us at behindgraywalls@gmail.com.